All right, my friends, welcome back to another V-Rising video. This one's going to go over passives. I'm going to be analyzing them, kind of talking about where they're good and how to think about them whenever you are deciding on a build. So there's a lot to consider with this, so let's go ahead and get started really quickly. So first things first, big change here. There are only 2 tiers of passives now. You can unlock them still at the Altar of Stygian Awakening, but they're unlocked randomly like research. You can also get them as drops from tier 1 and tier 2 incursion bosses as little scrolls to unlock here. And keep in mind, if you get a duplicate, you can devour it for a pretty decent amount of Stygian shards. The greater Stygian shard amount for tier 2s is 100. That's pretty good. So just keep that in mind. Okay, let's go ahead and look at these passives now. So we're going to go ahead and analyze these from a standpoint of like how to approach them from builds. So the tier 1s, these ones in general are a lot more niche than the tier 2s. So elemental awakenings are very much mostly kind of niche, depending on what you're building. Whereas the tier 2s are mostly just like full on offense with some like decent effects, with a few exceptions. So to start out, we have Blood Spray. Now keep in mind, each of these passives, except for like, I believe it's only 2 of them. I think it's just, yeah, it's just these 2, Renewing Flames and Soul Drinker, do not give you a unit of stats. These do not give you any unit of stats or sources of stats, but every other thing, every other passive gives you at least 1 unit of a stat. Starting with Blood Spray, this is making a return from 1.0, but now it has 8% crit chance on top of it, and your crit strikes leech 5% health, and it spawns the Blood Orb as well whenever you kill something affected by leech. This one overall, I would say if you are running a leech build or if you're running a high crit chance build, it's not terrible, but I will say there's so many other good passives out there that this may be one that to keep, to keep in the back of your mind if you need extra crit chance specifically. But if you don't need the extra crit chance, I would probably say look elsewhere. Otherwise, the crit strikes to leech HP is really nice. I will admit it's really nice, especially when paired with things like healing received. But otherwise, this one's like, I would say this is a good passive, solid passive overall if you need it, but definitely not one that's going to like, nothing crazy to write home about. Sanguine Mastery, on the other hand, this one is really good, especially in leech builds. If you are running something like a Blood Rites or Veil of Blood, or if you have a blood coating specifically, then this thing becomes significantly better. Now, the important thing to note with a lot of these, they have if afflicted by leech or whatever status effect, then deal more damage. And this is where coatings come into play to an insane extent. A lot of these will say like, hey, do this thing if ignited or whatever. And you're like, oh, well, I'm not building for that. So like, why would I really want that? The thing is, things like coatings actually apply their effect. So if I do this, he has leech on him, even though I'm using 1,000 storms. And even though I'm not using any blood things, he has leech, which means if I'm running Sanguine Mastery, I poke him with that, and he suddenly he takes increased damage. Okay, so Sanguine Mastery overall also boosts the effect of your current blood type. It's one of the only ways to do this. Therefore, it is very powerful. It is a somewhat small boost, but like it is only 8%. But regardless, it's still very good. And especially if you, like I said, if you pair it with like coatings or other blood spells, it's super, super strong. This one's definitely very important to pay attention to. Chaos Kindling, on the other hand, I will say this one's okay. 7% spell cooldown rate, in my opinion, is not the greatest. There's just so many ways to get tons of spell cooldown in the game now, with like Draculan Blood specifically and things like that. Look at the tier 4 here. Critical hits increase spell cooldown rate by 40% for 3 seconds, which goes over cap. So like if I just do this and I get a crit on one of those or whatever it may be, then all of a sudden my cooldown goes through the roof. Let's go ahead. And then on top of that, I'm also running, you have spell cooldown, I think just like a bit through other things here. But let me just show you how fast this cools down with the crit. There we go. Look how fast it's cooling down right now. I mean, there it is. I got another one. Okay. And that's to say nothing of our spell, our spell charges and our recasts. So overall spell cooldown, not something super important to build for unless you want it. 25% bonus damage on ignite in chaos explosions ignite enemies. This is solid, but is also not crazy. Bonus damage to ignited or bonus ignite damage is pretty good whenever you pair it with the chaos mastery, whatever, with ignite lasting 1 more second. But overall, I would say you would only want to pick this if you're like super heavy into ignite and you're just trying to do as much ignite damage as you possibly can. Renewing Flames, on the other hand, is a crazy strong passive because while it doesn't give you a unit of stats, overall it is seriously wild because 8% increased spell damage to enemies afflicted by Ignite. So keep in mind that doesn't mean you have to have Ignite. If you use something like a Chaos Coating, this thing is now ignited and all of my spells do bonus damage. On top of that, Ignite heals you for up to 25% of your spell power. So if I have this on, if I have something like this Agonizing Flames effect from my Chaos Volley, where if I hit an enemy afflicted by Ignite, it does Agonizing Flames, which it heals me for 12% 5 times, so 60% of my spell power, 25% of my spell power. You'll notice that when I do that, I'm able to, I'm going to use this really quick. You'll see 2 instances of heals coming on me when I'm not even hitting the target. There it is. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So that's Ignite and Agony happening at a single time. There's again. I mean, it's just so much healing here, and that's 85% of my spell power, which right now is 66. So keep in mind, the point of Ignite isn't really even to heal yourself. Like, you're not using Chaos Volley because you want to heal yourself, right? Like, it's not like the point. But it is really nice to heal yourself for, 50 or whatever HP just by hitting a Chaos Volley, not including Spell Leech. Very, very, very strong ability. And again, like I said, you can also enable it with Chaos Coating. Okay, Arcane Animator, this one's strictly a summon thing. The bonus minion damage, I will say, is obviously for summons is really, really interesting. I will say one thing to keep in mind is there is a new jewel for a few, for more spells, like Ward of the Damned and Soul Burn and Bone Explosion, where you can detonate your skeletons. And these skeletons will detonate for 80% magic damage per skeleton explosion. I don't actually know if bonus minion damage affects that, but that may be something to keep in mind. If it does, I haven't tested that yet, but keep that in mind. Soul Drinker, this one's just strictly PvE. I'm actually kind of confused why this is even on the passive tree personally, but it massively reduces your feed cooldown rate, so you can bite faster. And whenever you bite, it's some of the skeleton warriors. So obviously, like in Rifts, there might be kind of something there where you're kind of biting a bunch of monsters and using this, getting a bunch of skeletons, then you detonate them. So you just constantly have ways to like enable agony explosions. But overall, this one's kind of meh. And this one's, again, strictly really just a summoning one. Spiritual Infusion, on the other hand, is a preposterously powerful effect here, again, because increased healing received applies to things like Renewing Flames, it applies to things like Agonizing Flames, it applies to things like Veil Attacks, and it stacks with things like on Creature Blood. You can get more of that. So you have to think of all the different ways we can heal, things like Blood Spray, crit leeches, Ravenous Strikes, Weapon Skill, Life Leech. There's so many ways to heal yourself, and this just boosts all of them by 12%. You have to understand how strong that is. And like it says, 8% increased spell damage to weakened enemies. And just a reminder, that means you can apply that with a coating, and we're doing bonus damage to that target. So this one overall, extremely powerful if you're specifically looking for healing received and you're running weakened stuff. Very, very, very good passive. Flowing Sorcery. Again, we have spell cooldown rate. Again, not the greatest stat in my opinion, depending on what spells what build you're running. However, 35% chance to not consume Phantasm while triggering a cooldown reset. To me, this one's very niche. It's specifically only for high Phantasm builds. So for instance, if I'm running Veil of Illusion with right here has 5 stacks of Phantasm, and then I'm running Illusion Coating, if I do this right here, I get 9 stacks of Phantasm in one thing. I use this on myself, there's 10, and again, because the Spell School Mastery has increased our Phantasm stacks by 2, we do it again, and now the cap is 12 instead of 10. So obviously, that 12 doesn't only go to our spell cooldown rate, but it also goes to our spell charges. Look how many we just got there. I mean, that's 32, or 32 right there. There's another 32, another 32. We're just casting spells like absolute complete maniacs with these Phantasm stacks. So again, and obviously this is going to help us keep that Phantasm high, having a higher chance to reset that. But personally, I would not suggest doing this, again, unless you're running specifically a very high damage or high Phantasm build. But the one thing I would suggest considering is on the new legendary daggers. Hopefully this is not a spoiler for you guys. If it is, sorry, but here we go. New legendary daggers. Let's go ahead and look at the top ability here. The Q, Inflicts Weaken. These are seriously insane. We'll be doing a artifact breakdown as well. Q inflicts weaken, and it deals 3% bonus damage for each stack of Phantasm. On top of that, you press E, it has a 33% chance to give you Phantasm. So I do this, I hit E, didn't get any that time, that's okay. Let's do it again here. I'm actually gonna do, we'll do this real quick. There it is. And then we go E, and we got 3 stacks of Phantasm just by doing that on this thing. So you can understand, you really want to get to the point where your Phantasm stacks are high. Now we're at 11. Here we go. Now we're at 12, and this thing is going to do a lot more damage. So I'll show you, again, we're going to showcase this in another video. These things can do stupid amounts of damage. That's why I would consider this kind of in a build specifically with Wraith Blades. But even then, if you're running a full Phantasm build, I actually don't know if I would even value this all that much. It's nice, but it's also super easy to gain Phantasm stacks back with Veil of Illusion and Illusion Coating, as well as Mistrance. All those things combined with the right jewel effects and stuff, you can get 12 stacks literally in just by pressing Mistrance, dashing, and attacking. You'll have 12 stacks of Phantasm immediately. So, okay, next thing's here, Cold Soul. This thing is ridiculous, stupidly powerful. Again, we talk about weapon coatings here. Come on. There we go. Weapon coatings here. Again, the reason why this is so strong, spell crit chance or crit power up 8%. That's a really good stat if you're running a spell build. But even if you're not, increase damage to chilled and frozen enemies by 8%. That is not spell damage. That is not physical damage. It is all damage. That means if we do this, both this and this do 8% bonus damage. Okay? To chilled and frozen enemies. This is a ridiculously insane passive overall, and it's so easy to just toss a chill coating onto your bar, onto one of your weapons, and just apply that. Especially if you run it with like a spell build with something like Frostbat, you can do some seriously absurd amounts of damage. Then we're going to look at one more passive that goes right there with it, Chill Weave, which we'll get to the shield thing in a second. Breaking Freeze with the damaging attack triggers a Frost Nova, dealing 40% magic damage and inflicting chill. So these synergize to an insane extent, especially with Frost Coating. You can do something like this. Now it's frozen. Then you can do this, or so chilled. Now it's frozen. 169 damage on a Frostbat crit. 125. It broke, and then it also did the little Nova. Right? We'll do it again. 106 there. 63 there. So again, that's 63 plus the shield or whatever from the whatever it's called, the freeze. It's still chilled. 106. And we'll do that one more time. Yeah, so you get the idea. The damage here from a single Frostbat is just completely insane if you have the right jewels for it. And then on top of that, I'm not even using this. It's so funny. I'm so stupid. Okay, let's do it again. 126, right? Go like this, and then 169. Very, very, very strong. And again, like I said, you can go like this and get some more damage on top of all of this. So last thing here, sorry. 144, 115. Insane damage. So 144 plus 29 right there from the detonation from the Nova. So overall, ridiculous damage from these. Very, very good and very easy to enable. Lightning Fast Strikes. Shield efficiency. This is a ridiculously powerful stat because it works on things like this. It works on things like this. Right here it says if you hit a shield of frozen target, you get 80% spell power shield. It works on things like Veil of Frost. Right, we get another spell power shield from that. Now we have 250 more there. Now we have a 300 HP shield. Okay, so extremely powerful stat, and we aren't even building for shield efficiency. We have 10% from this and 10% from this. Okay, Lightning Fast Strikes. Sorry, this is just gonna make you stupidly tanky. Lightning Fast Strikes, 7% primary attack speed, very strong. Obviously, if you need attack speed, this is great for physical builds. And static triggers deal 20% increased damage, great for bonus static damage. What's not to like? Very strong ability, very strong passive. And enhanced conductivity, 7% bonus spell power. It's with one of the only, I think it's the only passive that actually increases your spell power. And then also spells can deal damage, a static damage. They can proc static. So if we go like this, you can see where it's also proccing static on top of it. So it hits and it procs a static. These two together are very strong. I wouldn't necessarily build them together per se unless you wanted to, but this spell specifically for caster builds is wild because obviously if you're a scholar, you're not usually wanting to just be up close and personal, like, you know, axe-ing and whatever. You're usually trying to keep a little bit of distance. And so this makes it so you can get more bang for your buck on that. Look at that. That's like no jewel, and I'm still doing almost 250 damage on that. Just so strong. All right, now we're getting into the Vampire Awakenings here. These things are very strong overall. These are a lot less niche. Like I said, you can probably see how these are kind of a little bit niche and how you want to build them. Whereas these ones are not as niche. They are, some of them are niche, but a lot of them are just straight up huge buffs. Hunger for Blood, probably the worst one. Primary attack, Life Leech, who cares? Who cares, actually? Just apply Leech to somebody and hit them if you want. This is just not good. 8% bonus damage to V-Bloods. Who cares? Just use Cold Soul instead. It's doing the same thing and giving you spell crit. And it's increasing all damage to everything, not just V-Bloods. Rampage, 8% crit chance, very good for physical builds, obviously, and it's one of my favorite passives. Physical strikes increase attack speed by 12% for 4 seconds. This right here goes above the cap. Let's see if I can actually get this. There we go. You see it right here, 12% bonus attack speed. And you can see it kind of just constantly proccing itself. Very strong passive overall, one of my favorites. Ravenous Strikes, really good way to increase your weapon skill power. This is one source of that, and one source of weapon skill Life Leech. Again, like I said, I would just use this instead of this. Like, why use this? Who cares? So use Ravenous Strikes for that weapon skill power. And 5% weapon skill Life Leech is a nice bonus, especially if you have something like Red Twins where you're throwing out 4 E's or 4 axes all at once into like a big like horde of mobs or something. You can get huge lifesteal off of that. Overpower, very, very good. And I would say this is kind of niche, but also in the niches it fits, it's crazy powerful. I wouldn't just toss this on for fun in like something like a spell build, unless I guess you could want it, because six stacks of weapon charges. I mean, we're talking, that's so many uses of weapon skills to get a single reset. It just isn't worth it. However, if you use it with something like Warrior Blood or Corrupted Blood, where Corrupted Blood gives you 15 weapon charge increase, and then you use it with something like Warrior Blood, like this, or something with Warrior Blood, right? We can do both of them at once if you wanted to. Let's go like this, swap them up, go like this. And now if we use this, we get 30-something, 35. We're using everything here. We're actually over the cap at 35 charges for a single weapon skill, which is really strong, especially if you run it with Mist Trance with the weapon reset jewel, because you can do stuff like this, and then reset your Q, and then get more charges from it. Okay? Now all of a sudden we have more things. So we have huge amounts of weapon charges gained from this, which is where, again, so it kind of increases that breakpoint. And even if I'm not running something with Corrupted Blood, if it's just Warrior Blood where you get the 12 charges, let's go ahead and do that real quick. I'm going to drink a Warrior Blood. Even if it's just Warrior Blood, we still like this quite a bit because we are at 20 charges, and that still lets us have a better breakpoint than whatever it is, 14 or something if we have with no, if we're not running Overpower. Okay, next thing here, Lethal Strikes, very, very powerful. Crit power, always nice for your physical builds. And then if the enemy is below 30% health, you deal 12% increased physical damage. This is really good to help get those like further, a little bit more reach to your damage. I've seen some builds where people kind of built around that execute effect, and they combined like a bone explosion with the execute effect on that right here. It says, oh, it's not on this jewel. That's okay. Combined with like Veil of Bones, where it says it does bonus damage. There's a jewel that Veil of Bones has that does bonus damage whenever the enemy's below a certain amount of HP. I've seen people do like big one-shot builds like that, or they get you below a certain amount of HP and they hit you with like a bone explosion and something else, whatever, a spear Q or like a Veil of Bones auto attack with like a longbow or something, just does crazy damage. Brace Mayhem, ultimate cooldown, ultimate power, kind of self-explanatory. If you're building an oat build, this is a required thing. It's just so good. Pretty much required anyway. Barrel Haste, very good. Movement speed, super nice. Shapeshift move speed. If you're an open world trying to chase down, especially in something like Rifts, this is always going to be a nice thing to have. Wicked Power, Spell Crit Chance, really cool. And if you're really building into Spell Crit Chance and you need this particular passive, 50% chance to have a random spell school effect is really, really cool, especially because spell school effects stack, right? So you can have like condemned, static, whatever. This is a nice way to get like bonus effects on people so that it's like hard for them to track, hard for you to track, but it's like all of a sudden they start burning from ignite. That's nice. Or leech or static or whatever. It could be really cool like that. Bastion, this one is one of the best S tier, top tier passives right here. Bonus max HP is always really nice, just having a little bit more tankiness. But the big thing here is the 25% reduces damage taken by 25% whenever you're CC'd. That means whenever you're frozen, you have 25% damage reduction. Whenever you're incapped, you have 25% damage reduction, etc. I don't know if it applies to snares, like fading snare, movement impairing effects, but I don't believe it does. But as terms of like any other CC effect, like whip and tangle or whatever, it is very good for negating or reducing that damage so you can actually survive getting like comboed by a team. Speaking of that, Dark Enchantment is right there with that. Another very tanky thing. 4% damage reduction isn't a ton, but it is one of only 3 ways to get bonus damage reduction as far as I know right now. And on top of that, it triggers a shield absorbing 270% of your spell power for 4 seconds when you take more than 30% of your max HP and health over the last 2 seconds. This is anti-burst passive. This is extremely good for glass cannon builds and also very good for, honestly, almost any build, especially for like team play. Because a lot of times in teams, you can get like spear Q comboed. While someone's spear Qing you, somebody hits you with an Axie, right? Just insane amounts of damage there. This helps you kind of like survive so you don't just get one shot by a team. 270% spell power is a very solid amount, especially whenever you combine that with Bastion. And then finally, Hunger for Power, Spell Life Leech, not really a big deal. 50% move speed. I mean, it's fine, I guess, if you want Spell Life Leech. But 50% move speed and 50% spell power for 5 seconds whenever you bite something. This is kind of interesting for something like Rifts. It's kind of the Creature Blood's counterpart. So if you look at Creature Blood here, the tier 4, if you bite something, it heals you and it gives you a 25% attack speed, physical damage output bonus. That's kind of the spell power counterpart to that. So overall, there's probably an interesting build you can do for this if you're going to be in like Rifts and stuff. But yeah, otherwise, it's not super required. It is pretty niche. And finally, Turbulent Velocity, very, very, very strong. This is kind of like I would kind of pick between Feral Haste or Turbulent Velocity. You can actually use both if you want. In open world, if you need all of that movement speed, you can use both. But regardless, this is more so like in the moment when you're fighting someone, you hit somebody and you get a little bit of move speed while you hit them. And so like obviously that stacks here, you see 4.7. That obviously stacks with Dracula's Shadow set, where it gives you a little bit of move speed there, and some other blood effects where they give you a little bit of move speed. So you get a little bit more temporary move speed, which is really helpful in a lot of situations. All in all, I would say in this tier here, some of the most important ones in the first tier, I'm looking at Renewing Flames, I'm looking at Sanguine Mastery, Cold Soul and Chill Weave, Enhanced Connectivity, Lightning Fast Strikes, Spiritual Infusion. I would say those are the big ones I'm looking at here. Flowing Sorcery, kind of niche. And then down here, I'm looking at Rampage, Overpower, Ravenous Strikes is great, Lethal Strikes, kind of specific to certain builds, but still very good. Brace Mayhem, very strong for ult builds. Feral Haste, very important for open world. Bastion, Dark Enchantment, S tier, going to be in most builds. You're going to use at least one of these, probably both. And then Turbulent Velocity, super, super good. Anyway, let me know if you have any questions on that. But for now, that is going to be it. We're going to get into builds and blood and everything like that, weapons as well, and some future videos. So that's going to be it. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll catch you in the next one.